call the Policy and Governance Committee meeting for February 2nd, 2016 to order. All board members present, also in attendance tonight. District Solicitor Joe Holland. Thought I'd use that word. For the sake of getting Mr. Holland onto other events, agreed to move his place up on what's already a fairly short agenda. Although that doesn't mean we're not going to talk about stuff, but still, do you wish to speak to the items on the conflict of interest thing before I get started with that?
Well, I'm not really sure exactly what I'm supposed to speak to.
Okay.
I talked to Steve Murley about that a little bit. He wasn't clear on what the committee was looking for.
Okay, well, we'll get to it then in a minute. But first, I hope you guys have looked at the minutes, and may I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Here we go. So you're gonna participate in the discussion as it develops, so to speak.
Right, sorry, yes.
All right. Both of the pieces submitted here by you, Joe, came from IASB, as far as I can tell. pretty much.
I did a presentation in the fall of 2014. and
Yep.
It's certainly not comprehensive. It was geared to give board members a basic idea about conflicts of interest that might not be so obvious.
Okay.
Can I ask you a good question?
Sure.
So in terms of the authorities that actually are out there, we have this Meinhardt case, we have those ethics and campaign disclosure statutes. Is there anything else that's actually already out there that governs us?
There are some Attorney General's opinions and some statutes, and that's about it. And the good news is there's not been a lot of litigation dealing with conflicts of interest by public officials. And what it is tends to be somewhat dated. And again, this material in general is prepared for lay people who, it's a half an hour informative session. You can't really go into the depth and the nuances. I usually don't quote Wikipedia either.
I was a little
But-
bit, it was a little bit of a shock.
Again,
But I thought, oh, well.
it's for lay people. I looked for what I thought were readily understandable definitions, and they actually had some pretty good ones.
The discussion we had previously expanded from where I think we initially thought it was going to go into the possibilities of other things that might have some bearing on board members, but the area of greatest interest in the outline from your presentation from 2014, I would say, would be on page 7, which concerns outside activities. And you got 3 paragraphs here, which basically, to be quite honest, basically boils down to this. It's not so much our worrying about, or no, let me put it this way. It's not so much my worrying about some conflicts of interest, although, once again, and this isn't germane to the person here. We do have one employee who serves another public office and, you know, has the ability to engage with the district, you know, in that capacity, you know. Okay, if we run into a situation with that, we'll take care of it, you know, as it happens, it seems to me, but, and I don't know who else might fall on that. Well, you know, we have a teacher who's the mayor of Hills. Oh, okay, all right, well, does it seem to be an issue? I don't know. The thing that got stuck in the public craw and to some of ours, you know, are those other duties, I mean, to be most generally or again concerning administrators, superintendents, assistant superintendents, involvement in outside agencies doing consulting. While there are districts that allow it, and we have language allowing, at least in one contract, you know, it seems to me it would be cleaner and neater if we just had language that just said, you know what, we'd rather that you didn't. And it doesn't matter whether it's a superintendent or assistant superintendent. It could be another administrator who uses his specific knowledge and the things he does for this district for other districts, whether it's on or off, you know, whether it's Saturday mornings or what else, you know. Honestly, that's where I would be heading. And I can't speak for Brian and Chris, but.
Can I back up one step?
Sure.
I'm staring at this language, which I know is from a statute, at the top of that page 7. I'm trying to figure out what this means. A person who serves or is employed by the state shall not engage in outside employment. There's going to have to be a modifier of shall not engage in outside employment. What's the modifier? Shall not engage in outside employment or an activity. So, is that where everything after that applies to both employment and activity that involves the use of the state's or
Yes.
district's time, facilities, equipment, and supplies, or the use of evidence of office or employment to keep the person a member? Well, that part's not going to come into play.
Right. It's
But
not.
is this saying that an employee of the district cannot engage in outside employment that involves the use of the district's time?
I think that's correct.
Because that does seem arguably inconsistent with what we've got in Steve's contract.
Well, definition, I mean, what is district time?
Right.
If
If we say that's not.
district time, I would assume in that context, like any public employer's time when the employee's supposed to be working exclusively for the district. If the public body has carved out time to allow people to work on other activities. For example, I know there are a lot of law professors that supplement their income by doing consulting work, and they're state employees. And so
Right, so what's the time?
there's no blanket prohibition, but I think a lot of employers do carve out time to allow people to do that. I think there's some teachers and probably some principals who do it either in the summer or maybe on a weekend. And again, that's not district time, so I think it's definitional. How do you define district time?
Right.
And one thing I think you're talking about, Tom, is defining district time as the entire contract year.
Right.
And that's, that's the extreme of saying no, absolutely no outside consulting work versus a liberal policy on the other end of the spectrum saying you can have X number of days or hours per year to do consulting work.
Which we, in Steve's case, we define.
Right.
But he may be the only person we define it for.
Although in a weird way, we define it such that it has to serve the district's interests. Which you could say means it's on district time.
Well,
you know?
yeah, it's, I think there are a lot of ways employees can serve the district interests, not necessarily on district time, but because of what they bring back to the district, I think if you've done any of those sorts of things, like putting this presentation together, I learned a lot doing it, and if you're doing work with other outside parties, you learn from that and hopefully you bring that back. And I bring this back to my professional practice. I would hope that teachers and administrators do the same thing.
Yeah, the teachers are a little bit different. Their ability to do things during contract time is covered in the negotiated
Right.
agreement, so.
Right.
You know. Could, in the summer, if you were a teacher, could you go teach for another school district? Yes, you could. If you're an administrator, could you go work for another school district? No, you can't, as far as I understand. And, or if it is possible or feasible, then I would say that's a bad idea. And we should have language prohibiting that. Or, you know, owning or operating or being part of any sort of company that engages in educational activities. That it seems to me might be parallel. It's not just a matter of time. It's the result of what seems to me comes from having the opportunity or ability to do it. I mean, I don't want to say it's financially double dipping exactly, you know, and I don't really mean hard and fast double dipping here, but I do mean if all you did was educational law, you know, and you were a full-time employee of the district as our educational lawyer, I would prefer that you didn't go do educational law practice for another district, you know, and if we were your sole employer. Or be part of an agency that did that. So.
I think that's a policy level decision of where do you want to draw
Well,
those
that's who we are.
And in terms of defining district time, I think that, as I say, the extreme is no, you will not do it in the outside consulting work period in the discussion, no. But then you have to, I think, maybe define what is sort of pro bono work, whether it's a speaking engagement or professional service in some capacity versus something where you're paid for doing it. I think that it does filter down through all those layers of district employees. Where do you draw the line? So I think they're appropriately drawn differently for different levels.
Yeah,
of
oh, I
employees.
agree. I mean, we could hardly stop. I mean, this is covered under a different contract. We could hardly stop one of our carpenters who might be a member of SEIU or the Carpenters Union from doing carpentry on the weekends for somebody. Okay. If he's a year-round employee, I might have some difficulty with, unless it were specified, I might have some difficulty with his going to do carpentry for West Branch School District in the summer, say, or I might.
So it seems like you would first need to figure out, you somehow define what employees are gonna be subject to this, and you have to define what employment is going to be raising a concern for you. And then at some point, you get beyond employment into just financial interest in something, which could be a whole separate step.
It could be, but I don't think it's unreasonable. I think we probably went a little far in the discussion last time about it. I mean, we got in areas I don't think we needed to cover, particularly like, you know, where's our 401k money going?
Well, I'm just, yeah, I think
that's not gonna help, but,
that just shows that you do need to define it closely, or else all that stuff's gonna get swept into it, and nobody knows how their 401k is invested.
you know, I mean, yeah. And, I mean, there might be companies I personally would rather we not do business with, you know, ERDI being one of them. You know, the decision of whether to engage with them or not is, you know, mostly gonna be ultimate, or a contractual level, it's gonna be a board decision, so. I don't know, just trying to preclude.
Yeah, there are all kinds of ways that people can acquire some interest in work they're doing. A good example is a university professor that writes a textbook and requires use in class.
Right.
I have a client who will remain nameless, who is a former teacher who wrote some software, and question whether it was district property or her property, but she sold it to somebody else. Probably her property, because it wasn't a work for hire situation. But there are all sorts of, you can spin out, aside from at a superintendent level or administrative level, all sorts of variations on that. So I think what you need is look at sort of the overall policy. What does the district want to accomplish by defining and restricting people's outside interests? And what can you do, first of all, and then how restrictive do you want to be?
Right.
And I look at it kind of like covenants not to compete. You probably could never enforce a covenant not to compete against one of your food service workers. Okay. You probably could against an administrator. I mean, setting aside the public employment and how administrators are hired, I think more in the private sector context, that the more responsibilities, the more duties you have, the higher level functions you have, the more things like that are enforceable. Because you take more transferable skills to another employer, to another venue. It's kind of what you're talking about with the carpenters, and they can have high levels of skill, but it's not an executive function.
Right. Brian, you got anything to offer here?
Well, I'm pretty quiet over here today. I know that this is something that I think was asked. We had to talk about a while ago, and appreciate you, Joe, taking the time to come here with this information. I think that I do agree. The page from the top of page 7 to about the middle of page 8 is the most relevant, I think, to the reasoning for asking for this information to be discussed in light of the time that it was asked by the group. I think that if the question about conflict of interest is about district employees in general, like like our mayor of Hills or mayor pro tem of Coralville, who are both teachers in the district, or the mayor pro tem of Iowa City, who is a high-level administrator in the district. I think that the top paragraph on page 8, that if he or she can't be impartial in consideration of a matter, granted this is a voting member of the board, then that member should not participate in deliberations and abstain from voting. I mean, the same could be applied to just not providing advice in those situations. And I think the point is in that first sentence was the punctilio. Is that what it is? Punctilio? Is that what it is?
Yeah, that is basically that really is, it's not a case as an application. It's a very famous case dealing with fiduciary duty and the standard of care. And it doesn't really deal directly with conflict of interest,
right.
But it's such a standard that tells people sort of philosophically what are you trying to do. You have a duty to, if you're an elected official, a duty to the public body. If you're an employee, a duty to your employer, and you have to recognize when you step over that,
right.
Something else takes precedence over that duty. And that's really the defining mark, is when some other interest becomes primary and your employment interest becomes secondary.
Right. So I was just going to say that if there was an instance where the board was relying on input from our individual who is mayor pro tem of Iowa City, if that were something that were that even gave the appearance of a conflict of interest, I would hope that individual would say, I do not believe that this is appropriate for me to engage in this conversation. When it comes to a discussion about Steve's contract, and Steve's activities outside of the district. If we want to talk about what's outside of the district, his district time is covered by his contract, his time away, consulting is covered by his contract. So if we don't like it, then we as a board need to change his contract, if that's why we're talking about this.
But I think the other thing you need to think of, you need to look in the bigger picture. Steve won't be here forever, and you're gonna have another superintendent at some point. And when you make rules, you need to make them, they're philosophically sound. Because you're not gonna have a new superintendent who really doesn't care, doesn't want any consulting time. They're happy doing what they're doing. Another one may think that they should work 10 months a year and they should be able to work 2 months a year for somebody else. And part of it deals with attracting candidates, because the other thing, at a higher level, people want to have that. It's in a lot of occupations, the higher level occupations, they want to be able to do that consulting work. So if you get too restrictive and job applicants know about that, they may back off. You could lose some good people that way. I think you have to have some accommodation to dealing with highly trained professionals.
That was actually the third point I was going to make, was that as clinical faculty in the College of Medicine, and Chris here is faculty in the College of Law. I don't know how it is in the College of Law, but in the College of Medicine, when we're attracting a candidate, they want to know what type of growth is there for them, what type of opportunity is there for them to write textbooks, to give the lectures, to go out and share the knowledge and the research of what they're doing in the College of Medicine, and to a lot of them to further their name. They're not going to be at the University of Iowa forever and ever. We recognize that, and that is a very important tool at a high level. It's good for the university, it's good for the faculty member, and it's encouraged. And I know personally, I would rather have somebody join our faculty who is giving the CE than is sitting in the back reading a newspaper at the CE. So that's been my experience in 15 years with the Department of Ophthalmology. So I couldn't agree more with what you just stated.
Do they have a conflict of interest policy in the College of Medicine or in your department?
Sure. I mean, you have to declare. You have to declare what you're doing. There's a certain amount of days. I think it's annual. I certify that I have not worked more than 9 days this year outside of the department, engaging in activities in my specialty, something like that. You have to go through it every year.
I know another issue that's particular to the medical community is acceptance of samples and gifts from salespeople.
Yeah, absolutely. $1.98.
And I don't know, that might be a source to look to for the school district, is how do other organizations deal with it? I don't know if the district has a conflict of interest policy written down or not. Not that I'm aware of, but you have a myriad of policies.
We do. Well,
I mean, the concern for me is that there are a lot of enterprises out there that their business plan is to sell us stuff or to sell us services.
yep.
And that, then you do start to worry about some kind of subtle conflict that's going on. And not every enterprise is like that. And so it seems like you have a choice. Either you want to really work to draft something that will define the things that you're kind of trying to rule out, which, is going to be some work. Or you could do the easy to administer thing and just say, no outside work. Obviously it has its own problems. But that's the stuff that I'm most concerned about is there's just too many people out there who want to influence us.
And honestly, Brian, since you brought it up, I am concerned about our political electees who are also employed by the district. I have been for years. We had another teacher, to just add to this, I think he's retired now. We had another teacher who was the mayor of Oxford for years and years and years. Well, not that Oxford's in the district, but Coralville certainly is. So is Hill, I mean,
Well, I think there's some specific, Attorney General's opinion that often offices are inconsistent. You could be on a school board and be the mayor of a community. Now, depending on the size of the community, they can be very problematic, but there's nothing inherently inconsistent if you recuse yourself when there is a head-on conflict of interest.
true.
It's not an easy issue to get a hold of or easy solutions. I mean, clearly, there's some, you can't require direct economic stake in somebody that's selling goods or services in the district. You can't be getting money to the table. There's some limitations in statute, partly because in small towns, if you want to buy something at the hardware store in town, the hardware store owner may be a member of the school board.
True.
And instead of saying you actually cannot do that, they cap it. I think it's $2,500.
Right.
And that letter was 2 years ago in West Branch. The school board president owned the hardware store, and it was less expensive to buy a nut and bolt at the hardware store in town to drive into Iowa City. You send one of your staff members in to buy a nut and bolt here and drive back.
Oh, I'm not sure.
No.
Somebody in West Branch to buy that.
So, there has to be some common sense built into it too. And that's why they have some de minimis things in the statutes. Up to a certain level, it's okay.
I do think some degree of it makes sense to do it, kind of like Brian is saying, ad hoc, just in the contract and approve it. When for example, I don't think if you write a policy, it would necessarily cover, are we gonna let somebody do this on work time or on, what otherwise would be work time, or that I can understand leaving that for the specifics of the individual contract.
I have to confess I've not read Steve's contract or the current one, but if I understand it,
Well, it's just-
he has X number of days,
Right.
which he's not committed to being in the district where he can do consulting work. And so I think by definition, that's become not district time.
Well, I don't mean to go over the definition, but just,
No.
we don't have to write the contract that way.
Right.
I don't think we need a
No.
policy that dictates how we write that section of the contract.
I think it's probably better to have a policy, the factors you consider looking at in going into a contract or a particular situation. Here are the issues you need to identify and address if you're going to do that.
So the policy would basically say this, the purpose of this policy is to cover on an ad hoc basis these contingencies of outside employment or activity.
That could be a component of it, yeah, if that's the focus.
Okay.
It seems to me like there's some things I think would bother everybody. Like if Steve were a part owner of the RDI, which is out there basically to set us up with vendors.
You're not, are you?
Or like I said previously,
Yeah.
if some private vendor is paying Steve personally to meet with him, to lobby us, to me, so that's some stuff I just would definitely want to rule out.
Well, that's clearly outlined, because you're acquiring a personal economic stake in something your employer has the economic stake in.
But I don't think we have a policy that actually says.
And however subtly that colors people's judgment.
Well,
I think a good starting point might be to look and see what other districts. And I know you've identified some of them, and there's specific policies dealing with the superintendent, but I think you'd look and see, do they have conflict of interest policies in general? And what do they say? And how does that translate to what might work here? And whether it's school districts, it might be university departments, it might be colleges, wherever. There are a lot of those combinations where you have public money and public employees, and then there's opportunities to make money on the side.
yeah, although, and Brian's point's well taken, I think the difference between the university and the school district is, sort of the difference between chickens and geese. Both fowl, both edible, both lay eggs, but they don't operate One's a lot bigger than the other, generally speaking. But I do think we need something, and it ought to extend just beyond the superintendent realm.
But if it were up to me, you could say this does not apply to any person subject to a collective bargaining agreement. I think we take care of that aspect of the
Right.
collective bargaining.
Well, I think if you've got a teacher or a principal as a spouse that runs a business and they want to help steer business that way, or I think you need a baseline conflict of interest policy says no employee of the district will acquire a personal economic stake in the acquisition of goods or services by the district, something along that line. I think that there are certain legal things you don't want any employee, and it can pop up in odd and peculiar ways. A good example is have a friend who had another friend, a retired district employee. They were doing some remodeling, and I don't know if I think the cabinets were just going to be tossed out, but they ended up in the shop of a friend of mine. It was district property, and I assume there are rules on disposition of district property too.
There are some rules.
And some employers have really silly rules. They're not silly rules, there's a reason for them. There's a case where a woman who worked at Casey's was fired for taking leftover soup home at the end of the day. And the goal is to prevent people from stealing property from the store. And so you draw a black line. And what black lines do you want to draw in the district? Because they can produce some harsh results sometimes.
I'm still inclined to rule out collectively bargaining, because I don't think,
I
what
mean,
I'm concerned about is all of that stuff. Maybe some of you could imagine some things in there that would be problematic, but you don't have a policy about them now. I could live with continuing not to have a policy about those. And I can imagine hypotheticals where somebody, you would, go to my wife as a doctor, that's not a good example, but if she owns the hardware store, I'm a teacher, that doesn't bother me really.
Well, I think it's more about the individual acquiring interest.
Well, what if what if it's a joint ownership of the thing,
Yeah.
but I have a job as a teacher? That's not what I'm worried about getting at. I'm really more worried about just outside employment by people who are in a position really to steer work and contracts to us for our approval.
Yeah.
Well, that's not really a conflict of interest issue. I mean, that's do you let people do outside consulting?
Well, that's actually more what I'm concerned about.
I'm hearing a couple different things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get them pointed. I mean, if they're separate things, then let's separate them. But we also, I think, need to decide if we're going to go in both those directions or in one, or combine them as being part of something, then we ought to start moving in that direction and let's decide what we're doing.
What if,
we're gonna do.
So, I don't recall us having clear direction from the board to start hammering something like this out. So my question is, should we go back to the board and say, we had a meeting with Joe, we had a report from Joe, we had a discussion about this, and we came away with two major questions. What I'm hearing from Chris is, more do we, period, let folks do outside consulting? Is that
Right, and I'm
Espe-
talking about sort of.
especially in higher up, right? Especially in light of, there may be entities that stand to gain from that relationship. And then what I'm hearing from Tom, restarting. Are you getting
Mine too,
this?
yes.
Yeah. Then from Tom, should there be a conflict of interest policy, period? And if so, back to Chris, should it include people working under collective bargaining agreement?
Well, I think that you have a state statute, which is a conflict of interest. I didn't put the statutory citation in here, and I can't remember at the moment what it is, but and that applies across the board from top to bottom, from a part-time cook to the superintendent in terms of using district time, facilities, equipment, or supplies for their own personal betterment. So you kind of have that already by state law as a conflict of interest policy. The question is, what do you need something beyond that? And I do think that the consulting work is probably, it's kind of wrapped up in conflict of interest, but it's really a separate issue. As a matter of policy, what does the district want its professionals to be able to do in terms of outside activities?
Well, Brian, the direction we got from the board was a little vague, but it was couched.
I don't recall what it was, so.
Oh, it was for us to have a discussion about conflict of interest.
Well, we're having that.
Well, we are doing that. And I think even if Chris and I, I think we're heading in the same direction as Joe pointed out, but I wouldn't mind having both things in place if they're necessary. And if conflict of interest is already covered somehow, or needs to be specified from statute and policy we've already got to make it clearer, then that would be fine with me. And to go down the line that Chris is following, if that needs to either be separate or included or side by side, okay, I'm willing to go that's fine with me too. We can certainly take it back to the board and say we have this discussion, but I still would like to go somewhere with it, other than saying, reporting back and just saying, well, we had this discussion. We're done. I would like to go somewhere with it, so next time or in the future, or if any of the political situations.
I'll give you an example, the diversity policy. We rescinded the diversity policy. The board said, please send it to policy and engagement, which was what this committee was then called. Send it to policy engagement to discuss next steps. We discussed next steps. And then before we took any next steps, we came back to the board and said, here's what we discussed. What do you want us to do?
Okay.
I think
Procedurally.
there's a logic to doing that before we do a whole lot of drafting. That's gonna
I mean,
take
because
a lot
three of us
time
could
that
do a
don't
lot of
have
heavy
the
lifting.
money to do, right?
A lot of heavy lifting.
But then if we're gonna go to the board, then we're gonna go to them with the very specific options. Do you want us to pursue option X or Y? What are you leaning down?
Well, and just from the few months we've spent together, I think the three of us would, if we start doing the lifting, we're gonna want to have something that is spot on. And then we're gonna bring it back and they're gonna go, this isn't what we wanted. So I want to make sure that we're doing this.
All right.
In terms of a conflict.
I'm not trying to be difficult.
No, that makes sense.
In terms of a conflict of interest policy in and of itself, you could import what's in state statute. If you look at a lot of existing school policies, a lot of it is some regurgitation of what state statute or administrative regulations say. That's a fairly easy, low-level type of thing to do. You take what's in the statute, you make it a board policy or district policy, just so there's something at a local level that's clear. The harder issues are the ones you're talking about. Where do you go? Once you set that floor, where do you go from there?
Right.
You got a floor and a ceiling. State law sets the floor. You're talking about the ceiling.
All right.
I mean, I guess if I were to bring questions to the board, first question might be, should we have a policy, I'm starting from my angle of it. Should we have a policy that restricts outside work by some people who work in the district? Do we have any sort of policy at all? If the answer is no, then we don't have to ask any questions. If the answer is yes, then I would say,
At what level?
Applies to whom?
Yeah.
Who do you want it to apply to? And then I would say, how tightly do you want it drawn in terms of what is excluded, what is restricted? Can you give us some guidance on what the board feels about those things? And then you can move on to, do we want a broader conflict of interest policy, to cover more generally? And then at some point, if you want to, you can move on to, maybe that's a part of that discussion. There's a difference between outside work and, investments that pose a conflict. We could maybe think about what we want to do with things like that, which is
I agree.
How about that as specific stuff we can take back, and like I say, if nobody wants to do anything, then we've saved ourselves a lot of time. And if they do wanna do stuff, at least we'll have a direction, an idea of what we should draft.
And if they want it done, by God, we'll do it, and we'll do it well.
And isn't it true that we're done with our policy reviews after tonight? Is that right?
It is,
So we
so
have time on our
we'll
hands.
have time on our hands.
All right, Jill, did you write all that, Kim, did you write all that down? Because I didn't.
I've got a good recorder. I'm taking notes too, so.
I didn't see you do that.
Okay.
I mean, we could do that list and break it down more.
I've got it on the
I
recorder,
think
so.
that's,
Okay, so when I report out on this to the board, or any of us can chime in at that point, we'll ask.
Yeah.
well, we'll do the poll people if we need to, to
Yeah.
figure out if there's actually,
Okay,
enough of a consensus for that.
all right. Is that good? Are we good on this one?
Oh, but in the meantime, if there's a way to find out if other districts have similar policies, that would be nice. I don't know about, you, I don't know why, maybe I can look at.
No, I can inquire and, on a couple of nationwide listservs, I can see if there's other people around the country, some responses, and there's only, but you can ask questions.
All right, that would be
I will
terrific.
see what I can do.
Well, thanks very
Yeah,
much
thanks
for
for
coming.
coming.
Welcome.
Giving
Would,
us some guidance here.
would it be okay if maybe I shot an email to like board leadership from a couple of other UEN districts, just to see if they have anything?
Sure.
Okay.
Whenever you can borrow from other people and not have to do the work
Yep.
yourself, you're better off.
Yep.
And it also can be thought provoking just to see what they've done and what they were thinking when they did it.
Yeah. I saw one, he went from Texas that I Googled, it was actually pretty concise and coherent considering it was from Texas. I can bring that one too, so.
So is there anything more I can add to the discussion tonight?
I don't think so.
Thanks, Val. Let me know
Thank
if
you, Joe.
All right.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for moving me up on the agenda. also.
Sure. All right, going back to superintendent directions.
Yeah.
I don't see a whole lot of stuff crossed out. Yeah. Yes, Brian?
I was just in the interest of just making some general statements. I don't think some of the policy numbers match up with policy numbers that are in existence. I tried to cross-reference them, and they don't make a whole lot of sense.
This-
Unless there's a different, is there an administrative policy book that I don't have access to on the website?
No, there's one out there,
The administrative guidelines?
yeah.
Okay.
That's where we dumped all the policies that the board lined out after we went through the legally mandated
Right.
adoption process.
And
But a
these
lot of
may
these are
not have
word
been looked
policy,
at
word
since
policy,
we
word policy.
Right.
swapped out all
'Cause,
that,
like,
so I'll make a
at the-
note to do that.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, at the bottom of that first page, under 3A6, Administrative Policy 1003.4, as far as I can tell, they only go up to the 900 level.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I didn't know.
you're exactly right.
I was just kind of, and
It's a
then,
conflict of interest, I know.
well,
That is-
and I was, I mean, and now, I know there's some stuff that we can strike almost immediately that's connected with the rescinded diversity policy. Second time this meeting that that's been brought up, but.
Well, I'm sort of backing up even further and related to what you just said. I don't really understand why we have anything in here that is also in some other policy. I mean,
That predates.
what does it mean that we are singling out certain policies to say the superintendent must do these? Whereas with a whole slew of them, we are not putting in, I would consider taking out everything that is just repeating some other policy that is elsewhere. Crazy?
No.
In which case the diversity policies have to go, even if we still had the diversity policy.
But,
It might depend on the specific introductory language, but
I guess I guess I viewed maybe the guidelines of as the kind of, if a new superintendent were to come in, here's the Cliff's Notes version of
Well,
what you
but isn't
need
it-
to
I
stick
mean,
to.
Yes, I'm not
Is
sure
that,
it's
is
so
that a fair
arbitrary
thing to
which
say?
ones we're singling out.
Steve, is that fair to say that? Here's the summary version of what is in, no?
There's no summary version.
Well, it's more of a summary than having every single, I mean, it's cross-referenced, perhaps improperly cross-referenced, but it's cross-referenced.
I mean, if we don't list something in here, that's not letting him off the hook from caring about that policy. That was my first question, is I thought, well, some of my comments would be moot if we didn't really need any of those things in there. We could just have a line saying, implement and enforce board policies. See board policy manual. I mean, I don't know, is there any reason not to do that?
I would, this is just something that occurred to me, I would guess that there are, well, I'm hopeful that all administrators, especially principals, read the administrative policy. I seriously doubt that they read all of the board policy. They're gonna be more inclined to look for direction in administrative policy. It would be nice if the numbers lined up, but if it's necessary to have some redundancy of statement in the two separate bodies of information,
I mean, I could live with that idea, but then I do wonder what are we leaving out as far as board policies we should be referencing, and I certainly didn't look to see
So I see,
which ones are incorporated and which ones aren't.
and I'll admit, I skipped right over the introductory paragraph and jumped right in with A, B, F, G, and K. But the introductory paragraph, I guess it's because this is like my second or third time going through various parts of the directions.
That's interesting. Level 1 does not actually include board policies in that list of things that
Right.
the superintendent's supposed to comply with.
right.
Tell staff how to accomplish ends would impede creativity and innovation. However, we do believe that certain means may not be justified by the ends. Some means are not appropriate even if they work.
That first paragraph kind of made me laugh.
If
Does not attempt to prescribe methods or practices, even though it's labeled superintendent directions. And the later sentences says the following directions define those procedures and behaviors that are appropriate.
Wasn't this called the
That's
four
sort of
speed
internally
limitations?
consistent.
Yes.
I like them.
Limitations.
We changed
is what it's
that.
called directions, yeah.
Right.
But if it said limitations, then you would say it's going too far to say that it defines procedures and behaviors that are appropriate. It just seemed kind of internally inconsistent in a way that maybe wasn't worth lingering over. Now, that last sentence makes a lot of sense. Not that first paragraph.
There's some odd language moments,
Yes.
which we could correct, but number 12, for example, not create a non-contiguous zone. I think it's just,
And then we have some questions, like if we are gonna omit this stuff from the diversity policy, it doesn't necessarily mean that we would wanna get rid of item number 13. That seems like a separate discussion, that he should work to reduce the number of non-contiguous attendance zones. That might be a principle we wanna hang on to, even if we don't have a diversity policy. Although a part of me says, well, he doesn't decide the attendance zones, why are we telling him to do that? I mean, nothing gets changed without our approval, so that's another reason not to have some of those things in there.
yeah, what happens, yeah. Yeah. I'm not even gonna step on that one at this point, have you?
Yeah, I know that, you know, for instance, 3A, 9 through 13, a year ago, when the diversity policy was rescinded, in this committee, I did raise the question, do we just have that stuff, do we just strike that stuff now, or when it comes time to get around to it? And it's time to get around to it, so I don't understand why it was written in again, why it was written into here, it should have just said one line, you know, if they want to say adhere to the guidelines in the diversity policy,
Right.
then say that. But
We can do that.
I never thought I'd speak so much about a policy that was been gone for a year.
And then the problem with incorporating board policies into it is that when you do change those policies, it might change, you need to change this thing again. If it just said comply with board policies, we wouldn't have to keep updating this thing every time we make a new board policy. Or change an existing board policy.
Well, I think with a lot of this, you know, if you look at the list of adopted, effective, and revised, it goes back 16 years.
Yeah.
You know, this is the game of telephone that
Right.
things get added, things get buried, things get forgotten, and unfortunately, it falls to us and well, people like Kim who check cross-referencing and because nobody's done it for 16 years. Or if okay. So anyhow,
On the very last page, number 6 talks about the aspirational class size goals.
yeah.
Is that the only place that appears, or should there be a cross-reference to a board policy in section number 6?
I believe that is the only place that appears. 3J5 and 3J6, those are the one, right? That's what we're talking about? Yeah, 3J5, although that may,
Five has
that,
policy.
3J5 might be in the, is it the board equity statement? Is that where we put?
Mhm, equity plan or something along that line.
the-
with
Yeah,
that too,
the
yeah.
one paragraph, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that that's in the board equity statement that came after the diversity policy. There it is again. And 3J6, shoot, that came, I want to say in 2012 or early 2013. The aspirational class size goals.
Well, what is referenced in number 5 takes you to board policy 102, which is the equal educational opportunity policy, which does not specifically lay out those goals. So it's kind of a cross-reference, I guess, but it's not the source of that policy. Maybe that's only in this document. Maybe we need a better reference.
Maybe. Well,
I have to ask,
so
Steve, you ever worry about these things in this document?
I tell people they're like driving down the freeway and they give you a median wall and a rumble strip. So from that standpoint, when we're looking at policy implementation, we're making sure we're driving in the lanes in between. Sometimes though, it's a 3-lane road, sometimes it's a 1-lane road, so sometimes it gives us more latitude, sometimes it gives us less latitude. So we look at it from that standpoint, as guardrails or guideposts for policy implementation. So I'll get questions that come from other administrators in the district or when we're looking at collective bargaining and they'll say, what about this? And you look at it and say, okay, does that fit within there? Okay, now if it fits within there, does it further board goals? Is it working to forward teaching and learning in a way that everyone at the table agrees is appropriate? So it's a way to bound our environment is what it is in many cases.
But as far as this particular document, if we were to shorten it greatly by just basically saying, well, pay attention to board policies,
No, because it.
do you feel like you were?
No, because in the end, yeah, sorry to interrupt, I was gonna say, in the end, that as we look to bound our universe, we're using a lot of things to bound that universe. We're
Not just
using
that.
board policies, we're using superintendent directions, we're using, I mean, there's a lot of components that make up the guideposts along the way. And so, you know, any one of them has an impact on them overall, but some are more impactful than others. This one probably not one of the most impactful.
All right,
So,
that's good to know.
Thanks.
does that help? I don't know. I hope it
Yeah,
does.
kinda.
Focus on that, but. And the reason I say that, sorry, just to editorialize, is because we get a lot of administrators that move to us from districts that don't have this kind of framework, and they're used to a far more prescriptive environment. You will do this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and when they come in and say, I have this much room to operate, what am I supposed to do? Because they're used to more prescriptive dictates on their administrative latitude. So when they find more latitude than they've been used to, that's a learning experience for many.
Well, my vote would be to simplify it, but I don't think we can do that as a group right now. Take a shot at it if you want me to.
Sure.
But only if you guys think simplifying is a good idea.
I would vote for much less change, I mean, other than striking areas that are no longer relevant, which Kim, I can
Certainly can do that.
provide to you, and updating cross-references. Yeah, I really, most of my comments in here were about cross-references. I spent a lot of time clicking on links and, that doesn't.
I didn't do any looking at things, I just assumed it was gonna.
Well, and then I went back to the website to just, you know, and then I did it that way, and it was like, that also doesn't match, so. Or it was, you know,
You mean the
a
numbers?
very loose association.
Oh, okay, that was my
It's
other
really
question. I mean, the numbers don't match, but then there's also loose association.
Or there's one where I think maybe 401 was supposed to be 104, or 104 was supposed to be 401. I can't remember which one it was, but yeah. so-
Well, I would agree, that
We
if
should
I look at
fix
this
that.
document, if it says, you know, allow any staff member to express an ethical dissent without consequence, and then I look at 401.1, and that's not actually what that says,
Right.
then I would say, let's leave this in, you know, keep the cross-reference if you want, or fix it if there's some place where it is. But if this is the only place that's actually saying that principle, then I would leave it in.
But right,
My
so-
feeling is if it's just repeating a principle that is in 401, I would take it out.
So 3B2, level 3B2,
Yeah.
allow any staff member to express an ethical dissent without
Let's
consequence.
see what's actually.
Board policy 401.1. I put my note, how? 401.1 is about equal
Yeah,
employment
it's true,
opportunities.
it's about equal employment opportunity.
All right.
So that's not actually saying what it says.
That's my note to self. How is this relevant?
Is there any, there must be some policy that's closer to that than equal employment opportunity.
Let's check the book. Pink's my favorite color. What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? But that's just, again, 16 years of revisions, you know, and changes in the board policy numbering system and carryovers and previous iterations of this committee maybe not being as particular as they should have been. Just saying.
Well, we should fix that then. I mean,
Or
there's a-
maybe, God willing, this is just an old version. Fingers crossed, but I doubt it.
Well,
I'm looking in the 400s, and I'm not seeing anything that seems to say what that line says.
how would we like to go about repairing the ills here?
Maybe,
And wait, let me ask a broader question first.
Hmm.
Does this have a direct bearing on the purpose of this document, which is to establish the superintendent directions here? We're going through them for that reason. I would say in the long run, yes, probably could.
Mhm.
But fixing it, there's a deja vu thing going on
I-
here. Pretty badly.
I would lean more towards the side of fixing it versus replacing. I would mend it, not replace it.
Right, okay. Yeah. All right.
That's me. I'm one of three here. Sounds like Chris is kind of
Well, I don't want to
interested.
totally replace, a lot of this stuff does not have any citation, and maybe this is the
Yeah.
only place it appears, you know, for example, all that stuff on financial planning and budgeting, most of those paragraphs have no policy numbers attached to them, and maybe this is the only place where we're actually telling the superintendent, we want you to do these things. So my in-between position would be, no reason to say it again here if we've said it somewhere else, but if we haven't actually said it somewhere else, then I wouldn't take it out of here, because it all basically made sense.
Right.
And of course, we at the very least have to remove some of the things that are just outdated, like the diversity policy stuff. And then there's line edits we can do, but there's no point doing that till we're
Funny.
gonna do the big picture.
Excuse me. And yeah, I mean, I can't, I don't know what the previous iteration of the board was thinking by taking direct lines out of a policy
No,
and
and I-
slapping them into superintendent directions.
And there are some things in here I would like to know more about, honestly. And that I've kind of asked about once upon a time. So, I mean, but we can always come back to this and look at parts of it, right?
See, I think I'm backing off a lot, because as I look up these things, you know, here's the one, develop a plan to achieve and maintain permanent building capacity utilization goals established by the board.
Yeah,
And it says board policy 501.4. Well, 501.4 doesn't say the superintendent should develop a plan to achieve those things.
Right.
It just says, you know, attendance areas and boundaries shall be established upon the recommendation of the superintendent of the board. So every time I do that, I'm thinking, well, maybe I can keep that one in, you know, because it's not really what it's saying.
Excuse me, I mean, but
So
there
maybe there's much less that I would actually take out.
Okay, but there are other things like, where am I? 3C, number 9, achieve capacity utilization goals for 9 through 12 by the 2014-15 school year. Why is it still there?
No, that stuff should go, because that's diversity policy.
that was all from the.
The real question though is,
All of diversity?
That was all,
policies?
9 through 12 are all
I think 7, 8, 9.
DP.
7.
Oh, okay.
Is it 7 too?
Well, that's the 7, 8, 9, 10,
I
that
don't know,
section.
Ken.
7 and 8 were not.
Yeah.
But 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13.
But the site
About
there
non-contiguous attendance zones,
But-
about,
is to a different thing.
And the site, and once again, is to a different thing. This needs cleaning up.
But-
Isn't it?
but like 12 and 13, you know, especially 12.
You're back in.
3A 12.
Yeah.
You know, not create non-contiguous attendance zones with either high or low minority student populations. I mean, that's tricky wording, but in practice, drawing a square around the $1 million houses or the, you know, less than $100,000 houses, saying these people go here and these people go here,
Yeah.
and that's what they were getting at. I understand, I mean, I think we all understand where they were coming from. That ain't kosher.
Well, I think 12 and 13,
12
we
and
have to decide whether we still want to have those rules or not. They're not the reason they rescinded the diversity policy.
Right, but 9, 10, 11 are
9, 10,
straight
11,
out of.
really, we had to.
Yeah.
Right.
So I got a little overzealous in my circling here, but I just looking at 12, it's like, wow.
Yeah, wow.
But if the policy has been rescinded, then really the things that 12 and 13 are based on have been rescinded. Maybe it's not really, nobody's asking us to revisit that policy question, we're just by giving us this to review.
But I do remember having this discussion last year at P&E and saying, it's coming up next year, let's hold off
Oh,
for
okay.
12 months and then we'll tackle it then. So here we are.
Yeah, okay.
So I think changes need to be made, but I don't know.
Well, then let's agree to make them, and then let's decide how,
Okay.
including the matching up of the numbers, which I don't think necessarily we ought to leave just up to Kim, who got
Right,
them
it's-
nothing better
Yeah,
to do.
Kim
I can
doesn't
go
do
through them,
enough.
I can.
Maybe we could divvy them up.
All right,
I mean, quite frankly, I think it's F and K are like one paragraph each. Right? A and B are more meatier. Not meteor, like, but meatier ones. Got it.
and are we looking for policy matchups and content?
I mean,
It seems to me that would make sense. That's.
if we're gonna cross-reference, it should at least make sense.
Yes.
And at least checking on it, say, does this make sense? Yes, no. And then maybe if it doesn't, make a suggestion what might. Flipping through the policy and saying, hey, maybe this. If it's, and honestly, if it's employee relations or employees of the district, you go to the, whatever level they are, employees, and you go, okay, this might be it.
Okay.
See, Kim, we're trying to help you.
You're awesome.
Now we are.
Let us help you help us.
So,
How come there's no 300 series?
don't go there.
It used to be there, it got rescinded. No, I don't know. There's no 1,000 levels.
800 either.
Are we are we looking at administrative policies?
Well, I'm looking at.
Which aren't even there
mandated
anymore.
board policies.
They're administrative guidelines.
They're guidelines now.
Mhm.
That's where the switch over
Give me the
is.
answer, it's pretty short.
Named to a tweet, yeah.
It's pretty short. 40 pages. So, the board directed the attorney to strip all policies except those legally mandated in statute, but to maintain the same policy numbering that is used throughout the state of Iowa.
Right.
So if there were no policies in 300 that are used uniformly across the state, those were all stripped out and dumped into administrative guidelines and procedures. So you'll find administrative guidelines and procedures that have 300s, even though there aren't any legally mandated board policies in the 300s.
Can
So,
we have
but-
in the list of policy, like the table of contents for policy, can we have that explanation for the missing series numbers?
You could have that, sure.
Well, let's do that.
All right, but if we passed a policy
Just the way
that was not
he
required
described.
by the state of us to pass, would it still be a board policy?
Yes, it is, and
Then it wouldn't appear in my list of legally mandated board policies?
no, it might be in an appendix, for instance.
That's what the appendix is in there.
All right, well,
Would
I-
it be
Discuss
worth
why they're both
reorganizing?
Because they're not actually appendices to board policies, which we've had that conversation.
Would it be worth it to reorganize the appendices into some sort of more coherent?
Good, it's hard for, Kim and I have a hard time explaining people for the same reason that you do, because we'll say it's in appendix 5, and they'll say appendix what?
Well, we know why they're
It's
called
really kind of board
appendices.
policy 5.
Right. Well, we know why they're called appendices. I'm just asking whether it would be possible to get them out of there and where they belong so that it's clearer to everybody. Yes? Would this be possible?
Possible, I don't know, that's a big
Well, I'm
task.
not saying we have to do it in a week or a month or just perhaps over the course of
Yeah, we get a little bit of time.
Over the course of
2016.
time, yeah, why don't we hit
It might be something to go at piecemeal. Any interest in that?
levels.
We
So-
could, we could get levels.
So it sounds like agenda setting is more circling back to stuff that we've,
Yes, but with the difference. The difference being Not that we're changing the content particularly, just the development of the organization. It's just, this is a housekeeping process more than a content analysis process.
Feng shui.
Yes, and if we have to move some furniture, we will. That's why,
Look,
that's the problem
I
with.
feel much better now.
That's the problem. That's what we're talking about with level 2, you know, the stuff in this one right now. So.
Is it possible that some of these things that we're telling you doing here should be cross-referenced to things in the administrative policy?
We tried to, in some cases, especially where we knew, where it was readily apparent to us.
Well, we'll just line up and everybody take a go at it or what?
Yeah, let's divide it up. How you want to do it?
For, I've already got to start on, the Bs. I'm happy to take the Bs.
So there's A's, there's B's, there's C's. Oh boy, it's all the way to G.
Yep.
H.
We're doing the rest of them too. Okay, sorry, I missed that part.
Yeah, although some of them are gonna use.
Some of them have fewer subheadings underneath.
Right, it's just about matching them up. I mean, we don't have to do them all, you know, in the next month. We can do, you know,
Okay,
we can,
Would it make sense to have somebody
I'd like to do J and K.
one part
seriously.
for the next meeting? How about somebody just, instead of 3 of us doing it at one time, one person takes the first step, we go over to the next meeting, if it's working, then the next person knows sort of how to do their step, or, because we could be doing 3 different things.
Okay,
There's no rush to do this thing, right?
Right.
To approve this.
Maybe just do it. Don't go gonzo, but maybe do some of it. But I would say, does it make sense? If it doesn't, what does? Make a suggestion.
Yep.
okay.
If you want, I mean, I'm happy to start off with A.
What I just said, I'm gonna do B.
You were saying B.
Yeah.
And then
What
C
I guess
is,
by A, I would include those opening 2 paragraphs, but I don't anticipate messing around with those too much.
Okay.
Should I do that?
You've already started on B's, Brian?
yeah, that's where I have a lot of my comments from today.
Okay.
Like, what? And then,
Wow, you know, I'll take a look at C to start with. It shouldn't take too long, and I'll
Why don't we
look at
just-
things, whether they match up with anything or not,
So we
so.
just do that in the next meeting.
All right,
yeah, fine,
let's do that.
no rush.
You're at A, B, and C,
Got it.
okay?
Boy, you got anything else? Oh, I want to jump the gun.
And we may have something coming back to us after we talk, after we
Well, so
report
you might
back.
want to put a
Right.
little spot for that.
Right. And we probably, gonna need to, we're gonna need to be able to access the admin policy stuff to make sure there's stuff matching up, right?
Is that
It's online.
It's online. They're called guidelines, not policies now.
Right.
Guidelines.
Board policies,
Yeah.
guidelines, we used to have administrative policies,
Or
and then
three.
people couldn't get them straight, so now they're either board policies or they're admin guidelines and procedures.
So that's the first thing we
Guidelines are
need to
kinda like
change.
this, the procedures are even further down the phone.
Yeah, and there used to be, back in the hard copy days, there were 2 notebooks.
Yep.
So think of these as the 2 notebooks.
Yep.
Now, the 2 notebooks used to be about the same size, now they're like
They
this.
did.
Now, that board one's like this and the admin one's like that.
Yeah.
And now, does the admin guidelines, is there, I'm sure there's table of contents, but there's no index or anything, is there?
No, that would be
Make it
silly.
too easy. Are we already to agenda setting? I didn't mean to rush you to the next step.
Unless anybody else has anything they want to get to here at the moment, since we've established a.
I just know our next committee is ready to meet, so.
Go ahead with agenda setting then, Mr. Luby.
Well, I just want to make sure that we are going to get back to that bullying policy, which we still have to talk about. Member Kingsley wanted to
Oh.
talk about the First Amendment. Otherwise, I don't have anything in mind.
Okay, yeah, we were asked to talk about that, weren't we?
Yep.
and the First Amendment aspects of it, yes.
Right.
And then I'd say whatever the board says after reporting to them about conflict of interest stuff, that may be coming right back to us.
Right. Okay.
And then the superintendent directions project,
I think that gives us enough to do.
it's gonna be, it sounds like a bad rock
Sounds like
band.
bad, right?
The superintendent directions
Let's give
project.
it up for Superintendent Directions.
SDP. Alright. Good.
It sounds like enough to me.
And our plate will be full otherwise as well, over the next few months, so. With, listening posts and engagements
Oh, yeah.
and scenarios and,
Okay.
All right, should I move to adjourn? Is it too soon?
Nope, you move to adjourn.
second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye. Cheers.
Adjourn.